Hey guys, what's going on? We're gonna go ahead and wrap up this week. Okay, so I'm gonna be briefly going over what we're looking at into Friday. It's very straightforward, very simple. But before I do that, I'm gonna go ahead and review what's been going on this week based on the newsletter I sent out Monday night. That way we can catch up, everything can make more sense, and then we'll dive in quickly onto what we're looking at into Friday. If you want to skip on what we're looking at into Friday, no problem in that. So let's go ahead and dive into it. So on that Monday night newsletter, it was an important range we've been dealing with. Okay, basically from 74.72. I have adjusted it on the smaller time frames. Okay, but for now, from 74.72 into the highs of 76.02, 75.99. Okay, it's not a big difference. Just use whatever numbers you want. It doesn't matter. Okay, and the big thing here was 74.72. Okay, if we take a couple steps even more back, sellers triggered a breakdown of 74.72. Okay, but they failed to maintain that move, and buyers reclaimed back over 74.72. And from reclaiming back over 74.72, the market then started to consolidate within this blue range. Okay, that's the range where the wider range of focus right now and into this week. Okay, and as I've mentioned to readers, if bulls want to take off, they got to break the market. They got to break out of this range. Okay, and in doing so, we look to attack 77.39. All right, but last week, okay, the market, we tested support, we trapped shorts, and over the next 3 sessions, we rallied into last Friday, and we even triggered a breakout. All right. Now, here's the thing. Okay, when we zoom in onto smaller time frames, we have a seller right here. Okay, and I've mentioned this, to readers. I'm gonna put this number here. What we were looking at, 76.02. Breaking above 76.02 only sends us to retest a previous breakdown area. Now, if we go back to the first 2 weeks of June, from testing the buy zone, the market rallied and attempted to establish a consolidation range within 76.48 down into 76.12. And what does that mean? The market attempts to establish value. It's taking a rest to attempt to keep that uptrend going. Okay, but that didn't happen. The market attempted to establish value, but buyers failed to hold the market in this area. And what happened is that triggered a breakdown. Okay, so sellers broke this range down. Sellers stepped in this area of the market that eventually set us up to retest, the buy zone into the end of June. Okay, so this review here is just to show you the significance of this area. Sellers control this part of the market right here. And for the market to look better, for the market to rally, to break out, buyers need to absorb the selling pressure here for us to look better. Okay, but what I emphasized, to readers on that Monday newsletter was, if we do break out of this 4-hour range, okay, we break out of it, it's sending us to retest this, breakdown area. And without a surprise, when we came up to test it, we got met with selling pressure. Okay? We got met with selling pressure, and we got pushed down. So, as I mentioned on that Monday video that I sent out, I hope you went over it, explained it very well, is I mentioned that for the market to look better, let me go ahead. So here's Monday. We got rejected on that breakout, and we sank back inside of the range. And I mentioned, for the market to look better, we need to push back into the upper end of that 4-hour range. We need to push back above it for the market to look better. So that was the plan that I sent out Monday night heading into Tuesday. And go ahead and pop it out right here. We'll go ahead and review it. So that was the plan. All right. And I broke it down. I said, what puts 7602 back into play? It's that upper end of that 4-hour range. Okay. I mentioned I want readers to focus on heading into Tuesday is, the range is set at 7610 into 7560. Okay, it's this range right here, 7610. Right here I have 7566. On a 15-minute time frame, it shows me 7560. Doesn't matter which one you choose. They're the same thing. 7560, 7566. It doesn't make a difference. Okay, but I mentioned that I want readers to focus on this range heading into Tuesday. I'll go ahead and highlight it. Okay, that's the range. Now, this was an important range because from the rejection in this breakdown area, the market attempted to consolidate. Okay, but what happened overnight into Tuesday is that sellers triggered a breakdown of this intraday range, and it sent us to test 7527. Okay, now if we pull up that newsletter, I did mention under 7560 right here. Under 7560, there are two areas that I'm considering to watch for buying pressure to consider a long entry via a failed breakdown. Those two areas are 7527 and 7479 into 7468. Now, I did explain in that video, that's why it's important to watch those videos. I go into much more detail. It's easier to understand. It's up to you if you want to listen to them. It's all about preparing. But anyways, 7527 was an important level. Okay, because as we discussed, when we reclaimed 7472, when I showed you on that 4-hour time frame, okay, 7527 was an area where sellers were active. Okay, we go a little bit more back, from this breakdown, sellers then stepped in this area now to push the market lower. And that's when we broke that 7472, and that's where sellers failed to hold the market. And from reclaiming this gray zone here, it sent us to retest the next area where sellers were present, and that area was 7527. And like I showed you, we're looking at the charts. Sellers stepped in here, pushing the market down. we lost it over here. Sellers still stepped in, but now we found support in this gray zone. Remember from the reclaim, buyers stepped in. We started to establish above 75.27. Sellers attempted to step in again, but we have clear support here. This worked and pushed us back, and we started to establish over 75.27 as support. Okay, it's a lot of flip. You got to look. So this turned into our support, right? I'm just going through extra detail, showing you why these numbers are important, not because I like to pull them out, make them up. Okay, so sellers again attempted to step in here, but buyers held our area that we reclaimed, stepped in, and then we started to establish this area as support. Okay, so when we lost 75.60, as I mentioned, an area that I was interested at was 75.27. Monday overnight heading into Tuesday, sellers broke this range down that I mentioned I want readers to focus on. But this only set up the market to test the support. Now, we didn't fully get there, but as we were nearing this support, buyers stepped in. All right, buyers stepped in. We saw buyers step in, okay, and from finding support in this area, this set up the market to attempt a reclaim back over 75.66, 75.60. Okay, and that's what we were focusing on heading into Tuesday. I mentioned bulls must reclaim 75.60, and in doing so puts the market back inside of the intraday range. Okay, this gray box here, and that was our key entry. Okay, reclaiming back over 75.60, longs can work, targeting 75.77, 88. But most importantly, where is it taking us? Right here. That was our main thing. So reclaiming, this breakdown here, we found support near our 75.27. If you didn't long it there, that's fine. I didn't. Okay, but I did get long above 75.66, and this worked. And reclaiming 75.66 set us up once again to test the upper end of that 4-hour range, or basically retest this sell zone. Okay, and what did I mention? What makes the market look better on the bigger time frames? Like I said we need to get back above this 4-hour range, reclaim it to get that breakout going. Okay, and a lot of people are waiting for it. They're right here, they're waiting, they're like, all right, let's see, and they get long in this upper part. But that's not how you want to trade it. You want to stay one step ahead, and our one step ahead was reclaiming 75.66. This is where we took risk. And as we're getting back into that upper end of that 4-hour range, and we know what's in this upper part of this 4-hour range is an area where sellers were present, an area where sellers control that specific part of the market. We were long here, and as we get here, we want to start de-risking, start cutting our long exposure. We do this thousands and thousands of times throughout the year. It's the same thing. Okay, so that worked. But I did talk about, this part right here. I said it's important to understand that getting above 76.10 puts the market to retest back inside of the sell zone right here. For the market to look better, bulls need not only to break above 76.10, but also maintain the market value above 76.10. This means that if the market manages to get back over 76.10, any dips that hit the market and knock the market back down, we need to see bulls quickly step in and push the market back over 76.10. This is a strong price action signal to keep on the lookout for, as it's a big clue that bulls are attempting to reclaim this breakdown area. Okay, so from the reclaim of this 75.66, it sent us to test the sell zone. Okay, and as I mentioned, we need to break above it. In this first test of the week right here, we got rejected. And what happened? Bulls stepped in, right? As we mentioned, bulls stepped in and got back above 76.10, 76.12. Okay, and as I mentioned, bulls need to reclaim this area. It means to absorb the sellers, and that puts us in a breakout position. Okay, but into Thursday, what happened? Wednesday overnight into Thursday, bulls failed to hold the market here once again, and that has triggered the market to sell. All right, now that's why I mentioned, you gotta be aware, of what's going on, manage risk correctly. Okay, so into the start of this week, I think we played it well. We found support. We went long on the reclaim of 75.66. You got to de-risk into that sell zone. Okay, de-risk into it, because look, we tested it and we failed to reclaim, and we don't know whether it's gonna work. We don't know if buyers are gonna reclaim it or not, but that's why you want to manage risk. Okay, we failed to reclaim it, and we're seeing sellers step in once again in this area, pushing the market down. Okay, that's what has happened so far. So into Friday, that's what we're looking at. We saw selling pressure here, and the market's selling off right now. Okay, there are 3 spots that I am focused on heading into Friday. Okay, now the first spot that I'm interested at is going to be, we're going to take this off, we're not interested in anymore. The first spot I am looking at into Friday is Thursday's cash session low, which is 75.48. Okay, there we go. I'm looking at 75.48 as the first level. Okay, under 75.48, I'm looking at 75.27. All right, under 75.27, there is nothing to touch all the way into 74.79, into 74.68. Now, what am I looking at to get long? What I'm looking at to get long is I'm looking for a failed breakdown. Okay, we see it all the time. Okay, right here in this part of the market, sellers broke down under 75.29. They stepped in, right? They triggered a breakdown. They triggered a breakdown of this range. And what happened? We tested support, we held, and buyers reclaimed this support. All right. What happened over here on Monday into Tuesday? Sellers attempted to break down 75.66. They failed. Buyers reclaimed. Right. Those are just 2 examples right here in this you know, in this chart that I'm showing you. So the first level of action that I'm very interested on is Thursday's low, 75.48. Now what I want to see is sellers attempt to break this down, which they are, you know. And the thing here to understand is, you know, buyers failed to reclaim this breakdown area. Sellers stepped in this part of the market. It's not a surprise. Into Friday, they kind of have the upper hand, you know, and their upper hand is they held their part of the market. Let's find some continuation now. How strong are sellers in this part of the market? Yeah, we saw them step in Thursday. Okay. How strong are they now tomorrow? Can they put follow through on that? You know, so that's what makes 75.48 the first level to watch, because they got to break 75.48 to trigger a continuation. Okay, so I'm watching this part. You know, what you want to watch for is if they break it, you know, you want to see weakness on that breakdown, and you want to see buyers reclaim back over 75.48. That would be, you know, the best case scenario. Okay, reclaiming 75.48 longs can work. And remember, we're pushing, we want to see the market push, and that would give us 75.75, 75.88. And ultimately, we're looking to retest the sell zone again. Nothing changes, guys. For the market to look better, we need to reclaim this area. All right. If sellers break down 75.48 and come into 75.27, okay, then we're watching this level, 75.27. And the same thing we're looking at for 75.48, we're looking at right here. If they break this level and they can't hold the market underneath, just like over here, okay, it may be smaller, you know, I don't know. If they can't hold the market underneath, reclaiming back over, it's a long entry right there. We work back up the same levels. Best case scenario would be a retest in this sell zone, and we're back to square. You know, step number one, we need to reclaim this zone. If this level easily slices through, there's really nothing to do, nothing enticing up until this 74.79, 74.68. And the same thing we're looking at these two levels, we're looking at in this, you know, zone. It is a higher conviction zone. Okay, that's basically what we're looking at. Okay, sellers have that upper hand, you know, from the rejection here. All right, show me. Okay, how strong are you? Let's put some continuation on there. Okay, and so far they are. Okay, we're watching 75.27 on the lower end right here. You know, we zoom out. Remember, when we look at the market from the lens of a 4-hour time frame, what the market has done is the market attempted to break out of this range. Okay, out of this range, the market failed to do so, you know, and it sunk back inside of this, you know, blue range that we're dealing with. All right, and just like how we were reviewing in the smaller time frame, 75.27, you know, 75.31, you know, watch this zone here. And why that's enticing is because this is the weekly low. It is a evening session low, but it's a weekly low. So, you know, we want to see a break, reclaim, and, you know, that'll be a great long entry. All right. If buyers just break this area down, that's why you got to be careful, is because we can make a potential full round trip back into the lower end of this range. Okay, and when we get here, there's nothing to do but watch to see if buyers protect this lower end to keep the market within range, just like how we saw here. Okay, so that's the downside risk. Sellers are pushing below Thursday's low. If they start to attack this level, you just have to be really cautious. Because if they break this level, and you attempt to long and the reclaim fails, the maximum downside risk right now is the lower end of this range. Okay, so that's something to keep worry of, just to manage risk. Okay, so yeah, that's what basically we're looking at into tomorrow. If we go to I'll go ahead and show you. Okay, here we get a little bit more detail on a smaller time frame, and that's why I said I have 75.48. all right, so let me see, my bad. Okay, just it's whatever. Oh, okay, so that's why I said 75.48, because when we look at the 15-minute time frame, it's a pivot right here that sellers have to break, and so far they are, and they're breaking under it. But if they fail to hold, getting back above here, we long, and we basically trade within Thursday's range. Okay, if they do manage to keep this breakdown going, 75.27, 75.31 is an area of interest. Okay, just stay nimble. We're range trading. Okay, don't make it any more difficult than it has to be. If we do see buyers, nothing changes. Is we gotta break into this zone and hold market value, and in doing so, it puts us in a bigger breakout scenario. All right, so hopefully that helps. We'll see what we get into tomorrow.